I'm going to let go of the employee who didn't finish high school and bring in a talented college graduate. Haha. I was unfairly accused of a mistake I didn't make and was informed I would be let go. Despite having dropped out of high school and contributed to the company for nearly a decade. The person my boss, now replaced by David, wants to put in my place is a favored newcomer who graduated from the same university as David and joined the company last year. David was quite disliked by the employees from the start due to his arrogant attitude, as he was hired as a manager through nepotism, being the brother-in-law of President Thompson. The new hire from the same university probably seemed endearing to him, being one of the few who didn't know enough to keep their distance. But it's unreasonable to think of making him a manager in his second year. Just as I was about to express this, would the underqualified dropout please expedite his departure? David mocked me. Seeing a junior employee smirking behind the tunning David, I sighed deeply and accepted my termination with a understood. I was grateful to President Thompson and didn't hate my job, but what happens next is no longer my concern. Let David and his favorite deal with the consequences. My name is Nathan. I resided with my parents and a younger brother, 3 years my junior, until our parents divorced when I was in the 3rd grade. I remember how my brother, who was very close to me, cried when it was decided that I would live with our mother and he with our father. My mother didn't want to split us up, saying we were close. But my father strongly objected. Even if my father took both of us, it would be difficult for my mother, who had been a stay-at-home mother, to pay child support for both. And if my mother took both of us and received child support from my father, it would still be a tight life for the 3 of us. It was clear that as we grew older, the cost of food would increase. I didn't want to be separated from my brother either, but I was left speechless when my father asked if I was okay with my brother living hungry. My father argued that it was best for each parent to take 1 child without child support, claiming it was a mercy for him to take my brother, who had 3 more years of care. Despite my mother's resistance to separate us, she couldn't convince my father. So, at the end of my 3rd grade year, I ended up living with just my mother. My mother, who had been a stay-at-home mother, was worried about finding a job, but she got hired by a home service company within 2 weeks. While she laughed that her housewife experience came in handy, I occasionally caught her in a state of melancholy. She probably worried about my brother. Despite my requests to see my brother, my father always found excuses not to let us meet. Too busy with a new school. Tired from daily lessons. No time due to after-school club activities. The reasons varied, but my mother and I never got to see my brother. By the time I entered middle school, my mother seemed less depressed about not seeing my brother. She's perhaps having adjusted to our life together or resigning to the fact that my father wouldn't allow it. We managed a stable life. My mother's job was stable and my grades were good. Thanks to her advice to focus on my studies to broaden my future job options. Life is mostly spent working, not studying. The choice of job can significantly affect one's life quality. Hence, it's wise to work hard in school to increase job options. That was my mother's belief. Though she had been a stay-at-home mother, she was actually a graduate of a prestigious university and had worked for a major company. It seems she resigned from her job at my father's request when they got married, but she regrets that decision now. Being a significant corporation, they offered comprehensive benefits, and numerous parents opted for reduced working hours to accommodate child care needs. She met my father while he worked at a branch of that company. Looking back, he probably wanted me to stay home because he didn't like me working at a bigger company than his. I agreed with her words. The father I was acquainted with consistently exhibited a sense of superiority. He looked down on my mother with just a stay-at-home mother whenever he was displeased. If my mom hadn't retired, There's no way anyone at the headquarters where she worked could have spoken to her like that. Hearing that story really drove home the importance of choosing the right workplace. If my father worked at the parent company and my mother at a branch, I'm sure he would have looked down on her, even though she was working too. Given how my father is, he probably behaves terribly towards anyone he considers beneath him, even outside of work. I decided I didn't want to be demeaned by people like my father in my career. Thinking about my future, I enrolled in a technical high school strong in aita. The high school I attended ranked around 30th nationwide, indicating it had a fair share of bright students. Perhaps because of that, there wasn't a small number of female students, and I even got a girlfriend for the first time in high school. I thought I was having a smooth sailing high school life, but then, just after I advanced to my sophomore year, my mother suffered a heart attack. That day was so cold that it snowed, even though it was April. I contacted my father for the first time in years. I wanted to ask for financial support. I didn't expect my father, who hadn't even sent me a word for birthdays or congratulated me on my entrance or graduation, to help. But he's still my father, after all. We agreed on no child support, didn't we? You'll have to manage on your own. Though it was a faint hope, my father flatly refused me. I quickly started a part-time job. It was at a diner run by an elderly couple nearby. Knowing my situation, the elderly couple took quite a liking to me. The meals they provided were lavish, and they were generous with my wages too. Thanks to them, I was able to continue living as before, but one day they said, "We've decided to close the diner, sorry." They decided to close due to physical limitations. I later heard from a regular customer that the business was barely making it. Despite that, they provided lavish meals for me, an outsider, and were generous with my pay, which made me feel guilty. The next part-time job I decided on was at a convenience store, but due to a staff shortage, I ended up working long hours. From 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. after school, and from early morning at 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. right before going to school. I ended up spending 9 hours a day on part-time work, regardless of weekdays or weekends. I was supposed to work only 5 hours from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., but I agreed to help out for a while because they were short-staffed. However, this became the norm, and there was no improvement even after more than 2 months. With almost no free time left, I was dumped by my girlfriend and began to neglect my studies. After a while, I ran into the elderly couple who owned the diner where I first worked. They happened to come to the convenience store with their grandchild. The elderly couple was surprised to see me. I had lost a lot of weight. The elderly couple, concerned for me, invited me to come to the diner on my days off. Even though the diner had closed, it was also their home, so the couple continued to live there. When I visited them as promised, after school on a weekday off from my part-time job, the couple prepared a lavish meal just like they used to when I worked for them. And then I was informed that I was being made to work illegally. 15 to 18-year-olds can only work 8 hours a day. Up to 40 hours a week, according to the law. I was working 9 hours a day, without breaks, and 54 hours a week with a 6-day work schedule. You'll ruin your health working like that. The couple was worried, but I told them I was thinking of dropping out of school. Since starting the convenience store part-time job, I couldn't keep up with my studies, and being in the same class as my ex-girlfriend was tough. In hindsight, I should have quit the convenience store job and looked for another one, but at the time, I wasn't capable of rational thought. I was preoccupied with thoughts of dropping out. The elderly couple apologized, thinking the closure of their diner was to blame, but they weren't at fault. Not at all. Your kindness was a great help to me. I'm truly grateful. When I expressed my gratitude, the elderly couple offered to introduce me to a company run by their son. If you're going to work after leaving school, it might be better to be a full-time employee rather than a part-timer. With that, they introduced me to the father of the grandchild they had brought to the convenience store the other day. This company was a metalworking firm, taken over by the elderly couple's son from his uncle to become the president. My studies in school were primarily in IT, so I knew nothing about metalworking. However, they were willing to hire me as long as I was motivated. I ended up dropping out of high school to work there as a full-time employee, but it was quite challenging since everything was new to me. Whenever it got tough, I would talk to Alex, a former high school classmate. Alex was studying metalworking in the mechanical department, so he was able to give me advice. Even after I left high school, he kept in touch and was a significant support who always worried about me. As Alex was about to enter his third year of high school summer vacation, he made a proposal to me. He suggested doing something big using the information engineering I had studied and the mechanical technology he was learning. I was surprised by such an unexpected suggestion. Wouldn't it be difficult to find a time while working? Alex didn't expect me to freeze in shock. He was concerned about time. I know he's concerned about my time because he's aware of the tough times I went through with my convenience store part-time job during high school. I decided to accept his proposal, hoping to make it a memorable summer vacation for Alex, who was always so considerate. I started spending my time after work and on weekend with Alex. Though it was Alex's idea to do something big, he didn't have a specific plan, so we had to start from scratch. After many sleepless nights, the parts we created were patented. "We'll be rich if this hits big, haha," we joked around. Getting carried away, we had acquired a total of 3 patents by the time Alex was about to graduate from college. Alex had established a company to develop parts with patents while he was still in college. I was invited to join the management, but I declined out of gratitude to President Thompson, who had hired me after dropping out of high school. Instead, I agreed to help as an advisor. Around this time, I was transferred from factory work to an office position at the headquarters. Shortly thereafter, President Thompson's brother-in-law joined the company as a department head. This department head was the brother-in-law of President Thompson's wife. Whether it was due to his rapid appointment or his inherent nature, he behaved arrogantly and was disliked by the employees. The following year, President Thompson's daughter, Sarah, joined the company. Sarah, being President Thompson's daughter, never flaunted her status and was earnest about her work. This was in stark contrast to David, who acted arrogantly because of his family ties. David believed he would be the heir since President Thompson had only a daughter. However, with Sarah's entry, all the employees started to see her as the successor. Displeased with this, David began to take his frustrations out on me. David seemed to have always resented me for being a high school dropout with only a junior high school diploma. I had been subjected to unreasonable overtime and work dumping, but recently, the direct insults had started. It seems that President Thompson isn't fond of David, as he hardly ever speaks to him at the office. Even when David initiated conversation, it was quickly ended. David is a college graduate and a family member. Despite holding a managerial position, he is not taken seriously. In contrast, President Thompson, who had hired me personally, took an interest in me and often initiated conversation. That probably made David dislike me even more. The following year, I had a fateful reunion. To my surprise, my brother Michael, who had been taken away by our father and with whom I had lost contact, joined the company. Michael, who had grown into a fine young man since graduating from college and joining the company, still had traces of the child I remembered. However, Michael was somehow considered an only child. Wondering if perhaps Michael didn't remember me, I decided to pretend to be a stranger. While it was a bit lonely not being able to talk as brothers, I thought there was no need to disturb his peace if he had indeed forgotten. Michael, a graduate of the same university as David, was particularly favored by him. He was often invited out for drinks and seemed to be trusted with significant projects. However, Michael didn't seem to be very capable at his job, often making mistakes. Some of the work David dumped on me included tasks assigned to Michael, which I inadvertently discovered. I silently corrected and submitted the work, but that was a mistake. Michael, unaware of his mistakes, continued submitting documents without realizing. David, looking down on me, started to think it was okay to blame his mistakes on me. While it was still manageable when the errors were caught internally, Michael eventually made a mistake in a major project that inconvenienced our clients. Thinking he could pin the blame on me, whom David looked down upon, Michael claimed the work was mine. I wasn't even informed about the tasks Michael was handling. Blaming me for the mistake was absurd. Yet, David, fearing he would be held responsible, mockingly said, "I'll fire the bottom-dwelling junior high grad and replace him with a superior college grad." Haha. I had been promoted to manager in an unusual move. Though the department only consisted of Sarah and myself, it would be unreasonable to make Michael, who was only in his second year, a manager. When I was about to say so, "Could the incapable junior high grad please quit already?" Haha. David mocked me. I realized the endearing Michael I once knew was gone. Seeing Michael smirking behind David, who was making snide remarks, I sighed deeply and accepted my dismissal with a "understood." Sarah tried to intervene, but David wouldn't listen. "Are you going to use your father's power against me?" Sarah disliked being viewed through the lens of being President Thompson's daughter. She always cared about not dishonoring her respected father. Probably thinking Sarah would stay silent if accused of using her father's power, David continued. But Sarah didn't stay silent. She explained that firing me now would cause more trouble for the company, making it a matter beyond using power. Still, David ignored her words and ordered me to leave immediately. I was grateful to President Thompson and didn't dislike my job, but what happened next was no longer my concern. Let David and his accomplice bear the responsibility. A month later, I was employed at Alex's company. After being dismissed, I immediately contacted Alex and started working for him. It was a small company with only 10 employees, but its annual sales exceeded $5 million. Most of that was from patent profits. In addition to the patents Alex and I obtained, the company had acquired dozens more. Alex's company developed parts and sold the patent technology. During a meeting to plan the next part development, I received a call from Michael. Of course, I didn't answer during the meeting, but the calls kept coming. "Who's calling? Isn't it an emergency?" Alex asked with concern, but after I informed him it was a junior from my previous company, I turned off my phone. After the meeting, I turned on my phone and found a message. "Big bro, my bad. Please answer the phone." It was written like that. Michael recognized me as his brother. Yet, he had set himself up as an only child and looked down on me, which infuriated me. The reason Michael, who was once so honest and kind, had come to look down on others could only be attributed to our father's upbringing. After divorcing our mother and taking Michael with him, it seems my father quickly remarried another woman. Essentially, he had been having an affair. This woman, a career-oriented individual who didn't want children, was apparently willing to raise Michael since he was still young. That's why my father was adamant about taking only Michael. The new woman in his life, who became Michael's stepmother, spoiled him rotten. Anything he wanted was bought for him, and she allowed him to do whatever he wished. Michael came to prefer his indulgent stepmother over our mother, who would scold him for wrongdoing and taught him to even refrain from sweets. Consequently, he began refusing visits with me and our mother. The message detailed these circumstances, but ultimately, It seemed to justify his behavior rather than show any real remorse. As I read the message, another call came in. This time from David. Wanting to end the nuisance, I answered, intending to express my annoyance. But David immediately demanded that I continue to allow him to use the patents at the previous rate. The part Alex and I developed during his summer break happened to be effective for a product my former company was developing. If I had developed the part while at the company, the patent rights would belong to them, but this part was something Alex and I had developed personally. Its economic value was estimated at around $10 billion. However, out of gratitude to President Thompson, I had set the usage fees quite low. Alex had agreed to this, but now that I had left the company, we had returned to the original price. Didn't Sarah say the company would be in trouble without me? It was David who wouldn't listen, right? I have been in charge of the Patent Affairs Department within the General Administration Division, which handled various administrative tasks, including patent applications and licensing. I was promoted to manager because I had obtained patents. It was baffling that David, overseeing the General Administration Division, didn't understand patent matters. Sarah, who had worked under me, was of course aware of the patent usage fees. She had tried to persuade David to revoke my dismissal. Unaware of such details, David had no right to complain about the fee increase. After all, it's Alex's company that grants the patent usage permissions, and there's nothing I can do if he's asked about it. The management of the patents for the parts developed by Alex and me is entirely entrusted to Alex's company. Without President Alex's permission, providing the patents at the previous rates is impossible. Even if they ask me to let them use it cheaply as an individual, there's nothing I can do. David, learning this for the first time, demanded that the person in charge visit him. Demanding that a representative from the company granting the permission come to the company requesting to use it is beyond impolite. Disgusted, I told him never to contact me again and hung up, immediately setting my phone to reject his calls. A few hours later, I received a call from my father. Assuming it was Michael crying to him, I decided to answer. As expected, he wanted me to reconsider the patent fees for Michael's sake. The condition was that I had to be working there. You'll have to figure it out on your own, I retorted, echoing the words my father had said when my mother fell. My father began to complain about my disrespectful tone, likely not realizing he was repeating his own words. When mother fell, those were the words you said to me, remember. At a loss for words, my father stumbled over his response. And then he made an unbelievable suggestion. That's right, it must be lonely living alone, right? Why not come live here with your new mother? He offered. What are you talking about? I've been living with mother all this time. My mother, who fell ill during my high school years, has since fully recovered and is back to work. A few years ago, she even started her own housekeeping company, actively hiring single mothers, which has been featured in magazines. It seems both my father and Michael thought our mother had passed away. You thought I was all alone, yet you offered me no help when I was in high school. When I said that, my father hung up without a word. I thought he should have at least offered an apology before hanging up, but since I had no intention of forgiving him, it saved me the wasted time. Besides, the misunderstanding by my father and Michael might have been partly my fault. Dropping out of high school required a parent's permission, and I had asked my father to sign for it. Without asking any questions, he signed immediately and sent it back. I did this because I didn't want to worry my mother, who was battling her illness at the time, but my father might have thought he had to sign because my mother had passed away. His immediate signing without inquiry probably meant he didn't care much about my presence. This allowed me to stabilize my life, but it left me feeling unsettled. When I mentioned this to my mother, "It's your fault for not consulting me," she said. Until Michael joined a company as my junior, my mother didn't know I had dropped out of high school. Even after dropping out, I continued to pretend to go to high school. She believed I was being supported financially by my father and felt guilty towards him. However, when Michael joined a company and started mocking me for being a junior high school graduate along with David, I became irritated, forgot my lie, and complained to my mother, which led to her discovering the truth. After scolding me for acting recklessly and making decisions on my own, my mother apologized to me repeatedly. But it's not like she wanted to become sick. My father, who knew I was struggling but chose not to help, was the most to blame. As we talked, my mother also became irritated, and we ended up complaining about my father together. In a way, dropping out of high school was beneficial since it led to obtaining patents, so it wasn't all bad. Although I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss my high school days, I don't regret my decision. Later on, after hearing the story from Sarah, President Thompson fired David and gave Michael a 6-month pay cut. It seems President Thompson never had a high opinion of David to begin with. He regretted hiring David, who had been pushed onto him by his wife's sister, with the condition that he could be fired if he caused any trouble. Michael, still young, was given a chance for re-education in hopes he might change his ways with just a pay cut. I knew about this because Sarah told me. After I left the company, Sarah kept inviting me out to eat. Thinking she was trying to appease me over the patent rights, I continuously refused. Eventually feeling guilty for refusing so many times, I clearly told her, I don't have the right to decide the price of the patents, so I can only keep refusing your invitations. Sarah was surprised, not realizing I had thought that way about her invitations. She had no such intentions and simply didn't want to become distant from me. She truly just wanted to have a meal with me. Since the patent issue wasn't involved, going out to eat wasn't a problem. Sarah and I started going out for meals frequently, and she eventually confessed her feelings to me. Surprised, as I hadn't expected her feelings to be romantic, I accepted her confession, having harbored some feelings for her myself. Now, I'm more smitten with Sarah than she is with me. Although President Thompson asked me to return, I declined, saying I enjoyed my current job. I didn't dislike metalworking, but I found the work in part development more enjoyable. President Thompson accepted this, saying it was fortunate I found a job I enjoyed. We've since established a good relationship, even forming joint research and development project teams between our companies. As for my mother, she filed for damages against my father and his new wife. My father claimed it was too late due to the statute of limitations, but my mother had only recently learned of the affair. She had suspected his infidelity due to his cold behavior during their marriage but had no proof. However, it was only last month that Michael's message turned my suspicions into certainty. My mother is determined to thoroughly punish my father for not offering a helping hand when I was struggling. The court ruled in her favor, and my father and his new wife were ordered to pay her damages. They blamed Michael for leaking the information and kicked him out of the house. After being demoted and kicked out, Michael seems to be living a difficult life. It's unclear if that was the reason, but I heard that he was fired for getting involved with a married woman who was giving him money. If I, a high school student at the time, could support my mother and myself, then Michael, a college graduate and adult, should be able to manage with some effort. Perhaps a bit of hardship would serve as good medicine for Michael, who had come to look down on others. Furthermore, it seems the lawsuit for damages has led to divorce issues between my father and his new wife. The new wife blamed my father for bringing Michael into the family, and my father blamed the new wife for insisting on it, leading to an unresolved situation. Additionally, my father was seemingly forced to resign from his company. Not because the affair was discovered. Because my father's company was also using the patent technology Alex and I developed, and Alex decided not to renew the usage rights. Knowing how hard I struggled during high school, Alex was even angrier with my father than I was. Alex's anger might also stem from being raised by his grandparents. Alex lived with his single mother until middle school, but was sent to live with his grandparents when he entered high school, because his mother's new husband refused to take him in. Since then, his mother left everything to the grandparents and lost contact, not even providing child support. Fortunately, Alex's grandparents were reasonably well off, allowing him to graduate from college, but he felt guilty for the trouble he caused them. Hoping to repay them by making money through development, Alex proposed we undertake a significant project. When I heard this, I understood why he had been so eager to do something big, yet had no specific plan in mind. Alex despises those who fail to fulfill their parental responsibilities. He gets irritated even hearing news stories about children being victimized, so it's no wonder he's even more upset about someone close to him. We developed it with the hope that it would be used for the good of others, and I don't want it used by someone who won't even help his own son. Alex declared, refusing to renew the contract as long as my father was involved with the company. This led to my father being pushed to resign. Initially, my father refused to resign over a past affair, but the cold treatment from those around him became unbearable, and he left. People had perceived my father as a loving husband and doting father. But once they learned the reason for the non-renewal of the patent rights, they felt deceived by him. It seems my father had been introducing his new wife while still married to my mother. Everyone was surprised to suddenly learn he had a son entering elementary school, but assumed the boy had simply never come up in conversation. Discovering that the woman he introduced as his wife was actually his affair partner, and despite seeming to adore his son, he hadn't helped me, his eldest, must have felt like a betrayal. My father lashed out, saying, "You're the ones who assumed everything was ideal." While I can understand my father's feelings to some extent, adultery is generally unacceptable, and providing for one's children is a basic responsibility. Facing cold stares was a consequence of his own actions. After resigning, my father once stormed into Alex's company. He's complaining that it was unfair to terminate the contract over personal issues. Indeed, personal feelings were involved. But legally, there was no issue since the rights were still acknowledged, just not renewed. Alex refuted my father's arguments, and he left dejectedly. Later, President Miller of the company my father worked for came to plead for the continuation of the patent rights contract. "We'll accept the renewal if you're willing to pay a higher price." The original contract was made when the technology was new and its demand uncertain, so the usage fee was quite low. President Miller reluctantly agreed, likely because they desperately needed the patented technology. After President Miller left, Alex joked, "Is this what they call poetic justice? Promoting good and reducing evil?" Alex, striving to repay his grandparents, became the president of a successful company with an annual revenue of over $5 million and continues to live happily with them. My mother, who fought her illness while living honorably, started her own company and achieved success. Though we faced hardships, enduring adversities has led us to fulfilling lives doing what we love. Yet, my father, who selfishly abandoned my mother and me, ended up unemployed and burdened with alimony payments. His new wife, also facing alimony payments, is entangled in a messy divorce with her now jobless husband. Michael, perhaps influenced by being taken by my father, suffered due to his arrogance and condescending attitude towards others. Both David and Michael lost their jobs. In the end, those who demean others seem unable to find happiness. Perhaps this really is a case of poetic justice, as Alex said,